And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the history of Cambodia, and then also want to touch base on some changed lives. And so, yeah, it's great to be with you. And we're also excited to hear about what you guys are doing with gospel communities.
Super
and
cool.
and just hearing a little bit about the vision. We talked with Pastor Micah yesterday, and just hear the vision of how to just kind of make your own little community, but also with a heart to reach out. And that's a beautiful, beautiful vision to connect in your part of the world. So we thought we'd start out talking a little bit about some of the differences in Cambodia. And well, first of all, a little background. Of course, we're between Vietnam and Thailand. It's a little smaller in Minnesota, about 3 times the population of Minnesota. But almost everyone in Cambodia is Buddhist, but they also mix it in with animism, which is a belief in the spirits. And so the spirit world is very real there.
They have, every home has spirit houses inside or outside. Most Cambodian are outside, but they can be both and they feed it daily with either joss sticks, which are incense sticks, or little offerings of bananas, or whatever they want to do to make the spirits not get mad at them.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting mix. They do things a little bit differently in Cambodia. Just a couple of things here. This is the Cambodian keyboard. You see a few extra squiggles there.
These are all have like a N sound to them.
But there's 120 letters in the Cambodian alphabet. So it has the most letters of an alphabetic language in the world. So it's kind of a journey to learn that.
When you see a vowel, it will be paired with a consonant. But let's say here's the consonant. The vowel might be below it, to the side here, above, or over here, or any combination thereof.
Yeah.
And as well as consonants, they will stack them below, and then more vowels and everything. So you read kind of in a circle.
Yeah.
There's no break between words.
Yeah.
So it looks like someone took spaghetti noodles, threw it at the wall, and said, read that.
So I think we have a table upstairs. We have a Cambodian Bible. You can see what Cambodian script looks like. And so that was a journey. As missionaries, with the Alliance, are really committed to learning the language, both in terms of speaking and listening, but also in reading and writing as well. So yeah, that's part of the journey. You guys have deer signs. What do we have in Cambodia, right? So yeah, there are parts of eastern Cambodia near the border of Vietnam and the jungles that they still have wild elephants, Asian elephants, and you don't see them very often.
They also have tigers, but there are fewer and fewer.
Yeah, not so many, but every once in a while. We had one pastor's son that almost got eaten by a tiger about 10 years ago.
But he was fine because someone helped beat it off.
Yeah, so, but it still have that kind of interesting critters. So the Cambodia is about 70% of people would live in rural areas. This would be kind of typical for a classic style Cambodian house on stilts. And they have they have 2 seasons in Cambodia, hot and dry and hot and wet. And hot and wet, this keeps you out of the wet. And also that serves as kind of the living room for where people meet with one another.
Space.
Yeah.
You are always welcome to just hang out under anybody's home, and that is kind of how they do life. They are very community oriented.
Yeah, so. And communal. That's right. And so like in the rural areas, this is old school, but typically how oftentimes rice is the primary staple. And this is kind of the old way of transporting, but now things are getting more modern. This is a Cambodian F-150. And so kind of they've got kind of this 2-wheel drive thing. They've got a power takeoff for pumping water, and they will put a plow behind that to plow their fields.
You can detach this front piece to just do your field, and this is if you want.
It's just a trailer, yeah. So they use it for a little bit of everything. And then this is kind of what a market in the urban area looks like.
That's our shopping center where we get our food.
Yeah, and although it's beginning to change, we'll talk about that a little bit later. This is kind of like my morning commute. I ride a motorcycle. Motorcycle in Cambodia, you would probably call it a scooter. It's about 110 cc's, but they can do a lot with 110 cc's. For example, this guy's taking 3 dish cupboards on the back of a 110, and not only that, you can actually take like a huge water tank on the back. I think that's a 500-liter water tank, and they can do a lot with a little motorcycle. And it's also can be the family van. And so, yeah, kind of the safety laws are just a bit different in Cambodia, as you can imagine. Yeah, I think our record we saw was 7 people. This is 6. We
Because you
saw.
can always put a baby right here with one arm.
Yeah, that had a couple of babies, didn't it? Yeah. So yeah. So and then if you do have a pickup truck, a real pickup truck, that actually is a pretty good bus. And so it is. It's a different world. Now those things are changing now. This was more in our first 15 years. We've been there for 31 years.
We're showing a then and now.
Yeah, a little bit. But and then they have some interesting snacks in Cambodia. And actually, Chris has brought one of the snacks that is common in Cambodia, which is fried. They fried up. It's a tarantula. And so this is our daughter, Jenna, when she was 3. This is our youngest, when she was 3 years old. So,
what does it taste like?
Fried, crunchy food. They season it well, so kind of along the line of Fritos.
What's your favorite part, the legs or the body?
so, and so that was when she was 3. And then she had a friend that was
and in case you think that was staged, this is her whole life. I used to limit her no more than 5.
No more than 5. And so this was it's more recently. She had a good friend, a Korean friend, who was visiting, and this is her first experience with tarantula. So just kind of showed her how it's done. And then here is Jenna really showing her. This is when she was a senior in high school. So snarfing it down. So they're loving it, just kind of loving it. So they do have amazingly good food in Cambodia as well. They've got these fruits that are absolutely amazing, fruits you've never had, like mangosteen. They've got this very cool little banana that's the size of your pinky. That's the sweetest banana you've ever tasted. They have these other, papaya and so many other fruits that are so good there. But they have unique foods too. So that's a little bit
about because of the war, when people are starving and their populations were starving. Sources of protein are rare, especially if it's a landmine area. Your cows will die if they step on it. So would dogs. So there is not a lot of protein.
There was not.
There
before.
wasn't, and now it's increased. Of course, they're doing landmines being removed.
Yeah.
So that kind of became. Some of those things are now kind of more like a snack for fun. And it also is a throwback to a reminder of how to survive. And and they just made it taste.
And to ask how it tastes, I call them hairy French fries. And so
they're not hairy, really. You don't take it. It's been fried.
It's fried. It's fried, and but it's crunchy. Yeah,
Crunchy
it's actually not bad. It's really not that bad if you get your mind with it. So that's kind of just some of the differences. We're going to switch gears here a little bit to history. A lot of people don't really like history. I get that. I'm sorry. We're going to still go there because I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn through history, and it'll actually help you understand a bit more about the work in Cambodia. And so there was a season in Cambodia a little over 1,000 years ago when the Khmer Empire was one of the largest empires in the world. Khmer just means Cambodian. And so this was around 900 AD. You can see this is Southeast Asia today. So you can see Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand. But back in 900 AD, most of this was under the Khmer Empire. And so it was kind of Cambodia's glory days. Back in that time, they had this huge complex called Angkor Wat, which actually comprised of these huge, old, ancient buildings, many of them nearly 1,000 years old, kind of at the height of the empire. This is one of the oldest one called Mantie Sarai, which is the fortress of the women, interestingly.
Women's fortress.
And then this is and this is all stone, and it's just carved. So this is like, what is that, 1,200, almost 12 or 1,100 years almost. And it's still amazingly intricate in the design. And every square inch of this is just carved.
So this whole city, and it was quite vast, has these kind of buildings.
Yeah, so this is
civilization.
So this is one location. Here's another location. This is maybe the most famous one, called Angkor Wat, which is this very large temple complex. And it was interesting. It started out as a Hindu temple. That was the original influence in Cambodia. And about halfway through building it, it turned into Buddhism. And so they went from Hinduism from India to Buddhism, which is also from India. But it kind of all the carvings and stuff reflect those different parts. They were quite amazing engineers.
Yes.
This is a huge, pretty good sized bridge. You know, again, almost 900 years old. And then this was one called the Bayan, which has actually weathered quite a bit, but it has like 54 of these faces that say were a combination of the face of the king and the face of Buddha, kind of mixed together.
The idea is it's a four-sided, I see in every direction, all seeing, all knowing.
Yeah, yeah,
You can guess where the tie-ins for conversation about our God is.
yeah. And so this is, I think, our favorite in terms of appearance, called Taprom. And it just, you can just see, I don't know if any of you saw, there was a movie, Raiders of, no, what was it?
Raiders of the Lost Ark?
No, it was not that. It was
Angelina
Jolie movie, Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
A lot of that was shot
was right
actually
there.
in these locations.
Yeah.
And you can just see, I mean, these are, 800-plus-year-old, and, just the trees and roots that have grown over it. One of the interesting things that on this temple, here, Chris, let me. So you can see different kinds of animals, like a rabbit and other things. Well, look at that one. What does that look like?
Yeah.
It looks an awful lot like a stegosaurus, doesn't it? What's a stegosaurus doing in 1186 AD? I don't know. But it is very interesting that, and they don't have any answers for why they've got this carving here, but it's kind of a fascinating thing.
In some form.
Yeah, so who knows? Yeah, it is kind of crazy. So that was kind of Cambodia in its heyday. But then there was this long period of decline over about 400 years. Remember, this is the map of Cambodia. This is the territory that they were over, most of Southeast Asia. By 1805, this was what Siam, or Thailand, said was their territory, almost completely. Now, Thailand would not say that Cambodia was a part of Thailand, but they would say that it was under the authority of Thailand. And so I don't know if any of you have been following somewhat recent current events, but there's been fighting between Cambodia and Thailand in the last probably 9 months. And that fighting goes back to this 1,000-year disagreement about who owns what territory. And Thailand says that Angkor Wat really belongs to us. And Cambodia says no, and history says no. It actually came out of the Khmer Empire.
The writings on the wall are written in Cambodian, not Thai. So
Yeah.
I don't quite understand how they can claim.
Yeah, so there's this kind of ongoing debate, and all that to say that goes back hundreds of years. Because of this, Cambodia in 1863, as France was coming into Vietnam and also Laos, and the French kind of took it by force, but the Cambodian king in 1863 said, well, can you kind of come over and take over Cambodia too? So in Cambodia, there was actually a request to be under the French. And that became what became known as French Indochina, which included Cambodia. Vietnam was actually in 3 parts, Cochin China, Annam, and Tonkin, that became eventually Vietnam, and then Laos. And so Cambodia became a part of the French colony for about 90 years. And that lasted up until 1953, when there was a lot of independence movements around the world from the old colonial days. And so that happened in Cambodia as well. And the French, there was a young man by the name of Norodom Sihanouk, was a young prince. And the French thought, oh, there's a young man that we can kind of control. And so they gave authority to Sihanouk, but he's actually very shrewd. And in that journey, he actually became kind of the George Washington of Cambodia in getting independence from France. And so he was greatly respected. He was a man who was very, what's the right way? A bit of a chameleon. He would be very nice to the Americans, and he'd be very nice to Chairman Mao. And so he tried to kind of balance between the two worlds, and particularly as the Vietnam War began to heat up in the 1960s in neighboring Vietnam. So Sihanouk would kind of, this was Cambodia in 1960, borders are very close to where they are today, but there was a Ho Chi Minh Trail, which is how the North Vietnamese supplied their armies in South Vietnam. Look where they went through. It went through eastern Cambodia. And so Sihanouk probably kind of looked the other way in allowing that to take place. And then the U.S., of course, didn't like that very much. And so in 1970, King Sihanouk was overthrown by a guy by the name of Lon Nol. And he was very pro-U.S. And so he really said to the U.S., do what you need to do to take care of the Viet Cong coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And so the U.S. began to bomb very significantly along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And then as that was taking place, King Sihanouk was in China, and he was really ticked off at Lon Nol, and he basically joined an organization called the Khmer Rouge. Khmer Rouge means Red Cambodians. It was this extreme Marxist group of Cambodians, and Sihanouk gave his blessing to them because they were fighting against the Lon Nol regime. And as that took place, then the U.S. began bombing where the Khmer Rouge became more and more prevalent in Cambodia. Remember, King Sihanouk was kind of seen as George Washington. And so a lot of the people in the rural areas began to support the Khmer Rouge because he had been overthrown. And so at the request of the Lon Nol regime, the U.S. bombed the areas where the Khmer Rouge were having greater influence. And so there was, I think, more ordnance dropped in Laos and Cambodia during those years than in all of Europe during all of World War II. So it was very significant in terms of what was going on in that time. And so eventually the Lon Nol regime collapsed and the Khmer Rouge took power. And Cambodians said, finally, the war has come to an end. They were celebrating that. And then the Khmer Rouge came to power on April 17, 1975, just almost exactly 51 years ago. And they came in with welcoming into the city. But then in Phnom Penh, which at that time had about 2 million people, the Khmer Rouge said, the Americans are going to bomb our city. You must leave Phnom Penh immediately. And so it went from 2 million people to about 45,000 people in 3 days. Everyone was... That was not accurate. That was just a story they're telling. But at that time, they mentioned that, and if people did not agree, they would just shoot them immediately. So the Khmer Rouge came in under the power of the gun, and anyone who disagreed with them. So the joy in welcoming the Khmer Rouge changed in about 1 day when they began to understand all that was beginning to take place. The leader of the Khmer Rouge was a guy by the name of Pol Pot. He would be literally, he was a person supported by mainland China. He was the Hitler of Southeast Asia. Pol Pot talked about different forms of communism, and he said in Vietnam and in North Korea, China, Soviet Union, he says that's not communism, that's socialism, trying to work towards communism. But Pol Pot said, we want one giant leap to a pure Marxist state. So it's really the world's best attempt, clearest attempt at pure Marxism. And so what they did was they abolished money. They took the children away from the parents to be raised by the state. They separated families to go work in these collective farms that they had established. And as a result of that was what became known in the world as the killing fields. And this was this period of 3.5 years. During that time, about 1 in 5 Cambodians died. 1.7 million is the most conservative estimate. Some would say 2 million, some would say 3 million died. Of those that died, half died by execution, half died from starvation. So the world had a chance to see what pure Marxism actually involves. And they particularly targeted educated people. Pol Pot said 1975. This is not 1975. This is year zero, because forget all of history. We're starting afresh. And those that had been trained, either had been educated, those were seen as people that were polluted from the past. And so in Vietnam, they did re-education camps. In Cambodia, they just killed you. So they killed all the doctors, they killed all the teachers, they killed basically anyone that had any education at all. And anyone, because it was pure Marxism, the state is God, the government is God, and so anybody that disagreed with God would have needed to be executed. And they oftentimes executed in incredibly brutal ways in front of everyone. So everyone saw the power of the, as they called it, the organization, or the state. So that happened until 1979. So how did the Khmer Rouge get kicked out of power? Very strange. Politics is an interesting thing, and how governments and wars work is an interesting thing. God raised up the Vietnamese socialists, their army, to kick out the Khmer Rouge. They were very much at war with one another. Cambodians have a proverb that says, Cambodians love the Vietnamese the same way cats love dogs. And so they've had a long history of Vietnam where they don't like each other as well. And the Khmer Rouge attacked the Vietnamese a few times. Vietnamese army was very effective. And they began on Christmas Day, 1978, to attack Cambodia. And on January 7th, 2 weeks later, the Vietnamese took Phnom Penh, their army, and began to occupy Cambodia. And ironically, it's said that if it had happened a year later, instead of 1.7 million dying, it would have been twice as many, because Cambodia was so close to starvation for the entire country. And the Vietnamese at least allowed foreign organizations to help start bringing in food and other things in limited ways, and open up the doors for Cambodians to go out to refugee camps. Because the Khmer Rouge would kill anyone who tried to leave the country, the Vietnamese allowed people to flood into refugee camps. And literally millions of them did, and received help as they went into Thailand in those refugee camps. So that was in 1979. That continued through 1993. The Vietnamese occupied. As is oftentimes the case when any occupation army gets in there, initially the Cambodians were thankful for it, and then very soon they became very tired of the occupation army, and they got ticked off with the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese probably, they weren't doing it out of their goodness of their heart. They're hoping to take over Cambodia as a part of Vietnam, but that was a season when the Soviet Union fell in 1989, and the Soviet Union was the one supporting the Vietnamese, so their finances gave up. And then there was a Paris Peace Accord. Well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. There's a Paris Peace Accord in 1991 that would basically say Vietnam had to give Cambodia, the Cambodian land back to Cambodia. There was a peacekeeping force in Cambodia for a couple of years, actually did some good work. And then there was elections in 1993. And most significantly, there was a new constitution that was the Cambodians adopted, which is based on a parliamentary democracy, kind of like the British system, with a monarchy. And so this set a new course. And part of the interesting dynamic, it had been illegal to be a Christian in Cambodia from 1975 to basically 1990, 93, somewhere in there. It had been illegal to be a Christian. And this new constitution guaranteed freedom of religion. And that's what literally opened the doors legally for Christians to be able to go back into Cambodia in 93. So this was the Vietnamese occupation. During this time, the Khmer Rouge were still at work, and they were fighting a guerrilla warfare against the Vietnamese. The Khmer Rouge kind of went on the borders in Cambodia near Thailand and Laos, and they would fight this kind of guerrilla warfare. They would try to maybe build a bridge. The Khmer Rouge would go in at night and blow it up. And so that was kind of this season, and that went actually even past the elections until 1998. Our family arrived in Cambodia in 1995 with our 3 kids, age 6, 4, and 1. So our first 3 years there, this was very much a part of our reality as the Khmer Rouge finally were coming to an end. And so that brings us to kind of what I just call amazing turnaround. And the way we're going to look at this is we're going to compare our first term in Cambodia, which was from 95 to 99, and then our most recent term, just to kind of talk about how Cambodia has changed over the past 30 years. So this was what our family looked like when we first arrived in Cambodia. Chris looks about exactly the same. I look quite different. Aren't I a lucky guy? And I feel sorry for her. And then our kids then 6, 4, and 1. And Chris, I don't know if you want to tell about the time we moved up to the city.
The fighting was current, and there is a town called Pai Lin, and it's up in the area called Battambang. And there was a gospel response already starting to stir up in Battambang. The UN declared that area a no-family zone. However, God was already at work, and they asked us, our family, to move up there. And so we had a year of language study under our belts, and it was scary because we were going to an area that very decimated in all kinds of ways. And again, because the Khmer Rouge would have this one area called Pai Lin, which is where gemstones are mined, and that's how they funded their war now. And so that was very close to our city. Our city was 3 streets wide and then about a mile long. And that was the safe zone that was protected by the government soldiers. So,
Do you feel safe?
no, not at all. So this was my struggle. When we were in Phnom Penh and they said, opportunity in Battambang, like, will you go? We were kind of the next ones available in the slot that could go. David immediately said, open door, let's go. And I went, I hate war. So I did not want to run towards it. But I had already given God my life. And so I said, are you sure? And I was like, I'm not convinced. But if God's in it, I want to obey. And that's hard, right? So we packed up our pickup truck and we were getting ready because back then the curfews were real. You couldn't be on the road at night because that's when the guerrilla warfare would happen. And the previous week to our moving there had been 5 ambushes at an area. They wanted to retake the entire north. So this midway point. And so we knew we had to get past this midway point at a certain time, and we had to leave by a certain time because we weren't allowed out on the road. So we had our pickup truck all packed up, and this lady who was going to go help us transition into Battambang, Cambodian lady, she's going to live with us, and our pregnant cat, and our 3 kids, and all our belongings, and we put it in a pickup truck. And we were ready to go, but I'm struggling all night long because I still personally have not heard that this is something God is in. And I wrestled through the night. You know, talk about Jesus when he was sweating bullets and blood for him, but for me it was just sweating and so scared. But I said, God, if this is what you want, knowing about the 5 attacks and everything, if this is your will, I just need to know you're in it. And somewhere around 2 a.m., this is the first time in my life I actually heard this. I heard my name. Chris, I'm not taking you to Battambang to take your life, but to save it. And I was flooded with peace. I had been really just looking, what do you want me to do? As hard as it is, and with my little kids, it was even harder because me going is one thing, but kids, yeah, that's hard. So I took that to heart. And then we started our trip. And we're getting close. The road's not good. It's all bombed out. And you put little things over the ravines to guide your car. And so we're going along. And suddenly I notice there's no oncoming traffic.
That's not a good thing.
Not a good thing. Because remember, the hours are limited. We're at the midpoint. We should be seeing a lot of traffic. We're heading into something. And I just said to David, beware. Now, the woman who was with us, who would have also known that sign, was car sick. And she had her head down. And I am grateful to God because she would have freaked out. Because then what happened? We noticed everything was different. And suddenly, on both sides of the road, there were very tall weeds right up next to the edge of this little 2-lane road. Tall weeds right at the edge, here and here. And if you know about landmine safety, tall weeds hide an army. So we get to this spot and I said, David, this is where the ambushes are happening. Be alert. And then we saw government soldiers, not the Khmer Rouge, coming at us, both sides of the road, ignoring our vehicle. They're crouching down. They've got their rocket-propelled grenades on their back, and they are going like this, looking in the weeds because someone was out there. And on this side of the road, they also are doing the same thing. Some of them not fully dressed, some of them still barefoot, running to where this is going down. And we are in the middle of this ambush. And I went, oh God, I didn't hear that. That was just my brain. And I said, oh God, please hear this one. Don't let them torture my children, and don't let them see each other die. And most of all, glorify your name. I don't want to die for a political cause, but whatever happens, let your name be glorified. And we kept going. And we kept going. And we kept going. And we did not get harmed in that ambush. Got to Battambang, did not feel real good about that. But I said, I'll never go back on that road. But God had done a huge thing. And I began praying for this war to stop, because we saw fruit all over the place. It was already on the tree. And it was like, if you don't have time to pick me, I will fall off. And
people coming to Christ.
People coming to the Christ all over the place. And then just not enough time to disciple or teach. So it was a time of incredible miracles, miracle after miracle, actual miracles, guys, and I'm skeptical, happening. And I began to pray for this war to end.
Before you get there, let me just stop for just a moment, a moment. And so we moved up to Battambang, and as Chris said, it was just we felt like we were living in the book of Acts, to be honest. And as much as it was a hard thing to be there, we had this amazing sense, I think you would agree with this, of actually the privilege of seeing God.
Amazing things you could imagine God doing.
Right. And so, but our kids had kind of a unique upbringing. Like, this is our local playground, was armored personnel carriers.
Left in the city, just hanging out in the city.
And then they got to hang around on some anti-aircraft guns that were just outside of the town, and so we were there this is from 96 to basically July of 97. And in July of 97, there was this major fighting that took place, not with the Khmer Rouge, but actually between two government political parties.
Well, there's this picture of why that.
Yeah, and so I mean, this was where our old house in Phnom Penh used to be.
When I was living in Phnom Penh, in the house I thought was safe because it's far away from the war, and I heard those words, when this event came, our house was the front line.
So in other words, the place we thought was a safe place, which was the capital city of Phnom Penh, and we're going to the dangerous place, Battambang, up north. During that fighting, this was where our old house was. We would have been right in the middle of this major coup d'etat with tanks shooting into homes at point blank range, and our house would have been on the front line. Our helper's husband was killed as a part of what was happening, and that was July 4, 1997. And in our area, when the coup d'etat happened, we
evacuated separate, but I did not want to leave. I had fallen in love with the people, even though it was chaos. I had fallen in love with the people, and I did not want to leave. I wanted to stay. I wanted to remain. I said, they have nowhere to go. I want to stay here. But they said, we'll feel like we have to take care of you. It's best you go.
The Cambodians said that. So that's another story we won't go into today.
That's another story.
But all that to say that this coup d'etat took place as a mission. We evacuated for about a month to Thailand, to Malaysia, and then we came back after things had settled down. And then this was just a few months later. This was in No, on November 19,
We
1997.
know this date because it's our son's birthday, and we were having a birthday party in our house up in Battambang.
And our mission had ministry with some Khmer Rouge in refugee camps in Thailand. And some of those Khmer Rouge leaders knew about Kama Services or the Alliance because of that work in the refugee camps. We'd done medical work in those camps. And so I knew this, and so I talked with some of our Cambodian colleagues who were former Khmer Rouge and said, hey, if there's some abilities to connect with these former Khmer Rouge, let me know. And about 10 minutes before they arrived on our son's birthday,
there was what we thought was maybe a ploy because the Khmer Rouge generals had decided we're done with war. We'd like to lay down our arms. We want to start talks.
The government offered an amnesty to the Khmer Rouge.
So they went down to talk.
They went to the Cambodian Prime Minister by helicopter.
We did not know what to think of this.
Yeah.
And what we didn't know was on their return trip, they did not go back to Bailin. They stopped in Battambang to come to our house.
And so this was us meeting with three of former Khmer Rouge generals who had just come over to the Cambodian side.
These are the government
and they said, we know Kama Services from the refugee camps. Would you be willing to work in Khmer Rouge territory now that we've come over to the government side? And so that began this amazing dialogue and of beginning to exploring the possibilities of doing medical work in these former Khmer Rouge areas. And make a long story short, the government would not allow us to go there. They kind of, we'll give an amnesty, but we're not going to help them so much. But we ended up going up to areas nearby. And eventually we did get to those former Khmer Rouge areas.
So these were the three that controlled the monetary part of the war.
And
they
so,
down there.
So it was kind of this crazy story. And this was to visit the Khmer Rouge area, you had to go on this dirt road, and both sides was like one of the most heavily landmined places on the planet. You always wanted to just make sure your tires are on the tracks, and we were able to get in there and explore this possibility. And it eventually opened up the doors to get to those areas, but it took about 10 more years, actually. We worked in another area nearby. And so this was just this is in the Khmer Rouge territory. Those were some of the guns they used to shell nearby. And so this is kind of separate, but all that to say that today in the Cambodian church, some of our finest pastors are former Khmer Rouge. You talk about trophies of God's grace. We have a national church president who was former Khmer Rouge. And it's the power of the gospel to change lives radically. And it's been our great privilege just to be 31 years in Cambodia and seeing the Lord work in ways that are beyond our imagination. So this was our first term in Cambodia. So, this was what our electrical system was like.
Learning to love your enemy was a big part of our first term.
Yeah, and God honored that in amazing ways. When we were in Phnom Penh, this was the tallest building in Cambodia. Actually, it was built after we arrived in '96, about 15 stories tall. So that's this this is like what Cambodia was 25 years ago. And then now this is going to talk about our most recent term. How has Cambodia changed? Well, remember the tallest building was 15 stories. As of 2025, over 270 buildings that are 20 stories or higher, 144 buildings, 20 to 29 floors, 79, 30, 39 floors, 50 buildings, more than 40 floors, 10 buildings more than 650 feet tall, 3 skyscrapers in Phnom Penh that are taller than the IDS Center in Minneapolis. It is a different world than the world we came into in 1995. This is Phnom Penh. It is an amazing transformation that we've seen in the 30 years that we've been there, and huge amounts of money that have come into the country, primarily from China. Interestingly, there's some reasons for that, but it has been truly a transformation, particularly in Phnom Penh, the capital city, and Siem Reap, where Angkor Wat is the kind of the other tourist destination. Modern bridges that have recently been built. All these buildings, to be honest, all these buildings almost all of them have been built in the last 10 years. It's an absolutely brand new city.
Clean.
Minneapolis looks like an old town
Yep.
compared to Phnom Penh. And so all this transformation, our grandkids came to visit us just a year and a half ago. So it was great to be able to show them. And just like Cambodia's like become a tourist place now, if you can believe that. So they have this amazing zoo that they have. We have this amazing water park. You can go what does it call it?
With the wave, you can learn to surf on.
Wave surfing or whatever they call it. And I mean, they have all this cool new stuff. This is a 300-foot Ferris wheel in Siem Reap. They have shopping malls now.
Cleaner and bigger. Well, it's not as big as Mall of America,
but it's getting close. Yeah. And then they've got, this is a brand new airport. They just opened about 6 months ago. BBC talked about Phnom Penh, one of the 20 best places to travel in 2026. That's been in our 31 years, this kind of transformation.
Are we able to flex and change? Absolutely. Everything is happening by plan D, E, F, G. It's never the first thing. We learn to be flexible and address needs as they arise.
So this just shows foreign visitors, tourism. In 95, it was 220,000 for the year. This is in the millions. We're over 6 million for a year. So, there are people that are retiring in Cambodia from, the US and other Western countries. So, but then you still get from time to time, you see the old world that still sneaks in. So you see ox cart drawn in Phnom Penh even today as well.
So these are typical homes that we live in. See how they just sell directly in their home next to each other?
Yeah.
They're all connected.
That's kind of the home that we rent to when we're there. So it's been this amazing transformation. But, it's not about how things have changed or even about history, but it's about changed lives. And first I was going to say about ongoing challenges. There is a huge gap between the very wealthy and the
we still have very poor people.
A lot of very poor people, particularly in the rural areas, where if you can make $200 a month, you can survive.
Yeah, they're farmers. They can go off their land. During COVID, though, a lot of things decimated the economy, and so people began to take out loans.
Yeah.
Loans, not like here in the U.S., it's anybody can get a loan, but if you can't pay it back, we get your land.
They have something called microfinance, which has done good things in many parts of the developing world. Cambodia has destroyed the country, particularly for poor people, because they take out these loans, they can't pay them back, and then they lose their land.
And then in addition, they say your child now has to take on this debt.
Yeah, so the debt is actually passed on from parent to child. And so it's brutal in so many ways. And so we have I've talked about earlier this morning, some of the things that we're doing as a mission to help people do particularly sustainable agriculture in the rural areas.
One of our missionaries is actually assigned to the area of finances and talking about these issues and how to get out of that debt. So that is his
I always said, said to him, so you want to become the Dave Ramsey of Cambodia? And he said, no. He said, I want to train the Dave Ramsey of Cambodia. And that's a great response for a missionary, training Cambodians that would be able to do that role. So there are many ongoing challenges. In the city, you can live on maybe $500 a month for a Cambodian, and the countryside maybe $200 a month. But the number of opportunities to get that kind of income are still limited. So a lot of people are really still poor and hurting. And but we did want to talk about change lives. And this is a story. I don't know if you remember, Cambodia fell to the Khmer Rouge on April 17, 1975. So the day before the Khmer Rouge fell, there was a Khmer Rouge contingent that was trying to take the Phnom Penh airport. And so there were 4 soldiers that were going to try and get over the wall to get into the airport to take one of the final things that the government was holding. And one of the soldiers popped his head above the top of the brick wall, and the government soldiers had set claymore mines at the base of that wall. As soon as his head popped up, they set off the mines that destroyed the wall, killed the 3 guys that were underneath him. He had a piece of shrapnel that went through his leg, and he had another piece of, the guy on top, another piece of shrapnel that took out his eye, but he survived. And then that breached the wall, and the Khmer Rouge then were able to take the airport that day. The next day, Phnom Penh fell to the Khmer Rouge. So the guy who had been been wounded, that had survived, he was kind of seen as a hero by the Khmer Rouge, right? He'd been the guy that helped to, breach the wall to the airport. And so miraculously survived Khmer Rouge medical treatment, which I can tell you is horrible. But he was kind of seen as a hero. So he was given a high-level position. What was his position? He was a bodyguard for Pol Pot. So Pol Pot, the Hitler of Southeast Asia. And as a result of being in that role, he, of course, was personally involved in a lot of atrocities. I won't share it here, but just did a lot of things that were very horrific as a bodyguard for Pol Pot. Well, when the Khmer Rouge were forced out of power in 1979, he went with his wife, and they had several children, near the border with Thailand, and continued fighting against the Vietnamese forces that had come into Cambodia, and lived a guerrilla warfare life for these several years. And then his wife became very sick. And so they went across the border into Thailand, and there was a refugee camp for the Khmer Rouge. It was called Site 8 Camp. And Kama Services, the Relief and Development Arm of the Alliance, was one of the few organizations willing to work in that refugee camp. So we had medical work there. And while they were in that refugee camp, his wife heard about Christ, and she trusted in Jesus. And when her husband heard that she had become a follower of Jesus, he did what any good Khmer Rouge soldier would do. He tried to beat Jesus out of her, literally. And he would beat her until she was physically unconscious. And, there's not a lot of options for a refugee woman in a refugee camp, a battered woman. She endured this persecution from her husband and remained faithful to Jesus. And he saw it. He didn't understand, why is she not, turning against Jesus when I'm beating her so much? And so there was this little church that had been started in this Khmer Rouge camp, and he would kind of go outside of the church and he'd listen to what the preacher was saying. And he heard, for the first time in his life, there was a creator God who made the heavens and the earth. He'd never heard that before. And then he began to hear about this creator God who loved people. And even though that they'd done wrong things, that he had sent Jesus to forgive the wrong things that they had done. And in Buddhism, if you've done a lot of bad things, there's no hope for you because it's karma, right? You do bad things, you get bad. And so there's no hope in Buddhism. But here he heard of a message that forgiveness was possible. And then he took his wife's Bible and secretly began to read. And as he began to read the Bible in his own language, he began to understand more and more. And eventually, he decided he also wanted to become a follower of Jesus. And his name is But Nyan, is his name. And he and his family, when they closed refugee camps in 1993, he and his family moved back into Cambodia in Siem Reap. We had a medical project in Siem Reap in the late 90s. He was the guard overseeing our medical project. But while we had missionaries there, he began to be discipled. And he began to grow in his faith. And I remember meeting him for the first time in about right around that time. And he had this group of about 20 kids.
It was more than that.
Yeah, maybe more. But it was a bunch of kids in his little hut house. And he was very gifted musically. And he'd just say, they had like one Cambodian hymnal for the entire group. And the kids had all memorized it. And so he'd say like number 112, and then they'd all start singing and they'd do kind of this Cambodian dance. It was the coolest thing. And so they did this, and he had this amazing ministry with children, right? This former bodyguard for Pol Pot. God changed his life tremendously. And, he tells the story of beating his wife actually in tears in terms of how he used to persecute his wife. Then he began to develop a heart for his former Khmer Rouge fighting buddies. And he began to go out into those places and tell them about the God who is able to forgive all the wrong things that we have done. And some of those began to listen. And there were churches that began to be established through his kind of itinerant ministry. And actually, we'll stay back here. And so eventually, he probably planted about 8 churches in these different areas through his testimony of how God had changed his life. And then they have about, in the Alliance, we have at that time, we had about 40 churches in the northwest part of the country. And they vote to elect who will become their district superintendent. Guess who they elected to become their DS? It was Nyan. So he pastored a church, he was evangelizing, and also became the district superintendent overseeing 40 of these Alliance churches. So
his oldest son is the head of Evangelism Explosion in Cambodia.
yeah.
And it just continues to grow.
So I share his testimony as a reminder of the power of the grace of God. And I remember one day he came to our house, and I won't tell all the details, but he told me about something horrible that he had done as a Khmer Rouge soldier. And in tears, he just said to me, this is after he'd been a district superintendent, he said, can Jesus even forgive that? And, I just said, brother, Jesus can even forgive that. He knew it in his head, but somehow, I think the post-traumatic stress or whatever is still processing, all the evil that he'd been involved with in his previous life. And just to be a reminder, yes, Jesus can even forgive that. And he's used him as a trophy of God's grace. And one of the cool things, we had ministry, and it was working with Vietnamese who were living in Siem Reap, in the town where he is. And he opened his church for a Vietnamese church to start meeting there. The Vietnamese that he'd been fighting against, and he hated the Vietnamese. And now he loved the Vietnamese because of the difference Christ had made. This is with one of our Vietnamese pastors. And then this is actually also cool. There was a number of Cambodians that came in with the Vietnamese fighting force to kick out the Khmer Rouge in 1979. One of them was another man who later came to Christ. His name was Hien Goi. So these guys would have met in like the 1980s. They would have killed each other. Because one was Khmer Rouge and one was fighting with the Vietnamese to kick the Khmer Rouge out. They both came to Christ. They both became district superintendents overseeing our Alliance churches in different parts of Cambodia. They both play this kind of 2-string Cambodian instrument, and this is them playing together. Oh, so this is a 2-string Cambodian instrument, and this is him with Pastor Goi. Amazing grace indeed. And as this part of one of the baptism services for up in that part of the world, just a reminder that God is able to change lives in radical ways, and then those changed lives then continue to change lives.
And
I know
they ask,
yeah.
Who will you reach? Who is your Nyan? You guys, there's some Nyans in your community. May God give you wisdom and empowerment from up above to reach those very ones that nobody thinks could ever be reached, and that you will be able to love even to your enemy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if you guys are doing this gospel communities, I mean, it'll be neat to see how the Lord opens doors. Probably not to someone quite as radical as this, but to others in your community.
There he is, right there.
Yeah. So anyway. We're going to stop there and just, we want to respect time if you need to.
We didn't actually give you too many individual stories. So obviously a lot has happened in 30 years. We have been involved in a lot of things, but it's really hard to condense.
We want to respect time, but if there are any quick questions anyone would like to ask, we're open. If not, you guys are kind of received from the fire hydrant here.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of history, a lot of too much. So.